We had been best friends for as long as I could remember. It seemed like we had always been together, inseparable since the moment we first met as kids. I could still see her face, a little younger, her bright eyes full of curiosity and wonder, her smile wide and inviting. She had this energy that could fill up a room, a spark that lit up everything around her. I don't think she ever realized how much I admired her. I was the quiet one. The type who would rather sit in the back and observe than be the center of attention. But with her, I didn't need to be anyone else. We fit together like two puzzle pieces. We shared everything, secrets, dreams, fears. We knew each other's thoughts even before they were spoken. We grew up in a small town, where everyone knew everyone, and life was simple. Yet, somehow, we made it our own world. Every summer was spent running through the streets, playing games we made up as we went along. We didn't need anything else to be happy. Her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when she was excited, became my anchor. She was my everything, and I couldn't imagine life without her. There was no other friendship like ours. Or so I thought. Our bond deepened as we grew older. We still hung out, but now, things were different. She was no longer the carefree child, and neither was I. The transition from childhood to adolescence was always awkward, but with her, it felt like we could still be ourselves. Yet, there was something changing. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. It wasn't like the obvious teenage crushes or the awkward stages everyone goes through. No, this felt deeper. I couldn't deny that my feelings for her were evolving. I found myself noticing the way she looked at me sometimes, her gaze lingering just a moment longer than it used to. Her smile felt different, warmer, as if it carried 1,000 unspoken words. I tried to ignore it. She was my best friend, after all. And nothing was going to change that. But then there were the touches. The accidental brushes of our hands, the way she would rest her head on my shoulder when we watched movies late at night. I told myself that it was just the comfort of old friends, but deep down, I knew better. The day the truth started to unravel came in the most unexpected way. It was a lazy afternoon, the kind where everything seems to be at a standstill. We had just finished our usual routine, talking about life, what had been happening, the typical small-town gossip we couldn't help but get caught up in. She had just finished telling me about a date she'd gone on with a guy from school. I could hear the excitement in her voice, but something about the way she spoke left me feeling empty. There was a part of me that wanted to be happy for her, but another part, one I couldn't control, wanted to scream. I didn't let it show. Instead, I smiled and nodded, pretending to be interested, but the more she talked, the harder it became to focus on what she was saying. My mind was racing, my heart pounding. The jealousy was there, I could feel it creeping in like a poison. When she finished talking, she turned to me and gave me a mischievous smile. "You know," she said casually, "I've been thinking about something." I raised an eyebrow, trying to act normal. "What's that?" "I know this is weird, but, have you ever wondered if we're actually related?" she asked, her voice light and playful. I blinked, unsure if I had heard her correctly. "What?" She chuckled, clearly amused by my confusion. "I mean, we've been best friends forever. We're so alike in so many ways. Sometimes it's almost like we're connected in some way. Do you ever think about it?" I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know why, but her words hit me in a way that I couldn't explain. A part of me wanted to laugh it off, dismiss it as some ridiculous idea she'd come up with, but another part of me felt a strange sense of fear. "Why would you think that?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, but I could hear the tremor in my voice. She shrugged. "I don't know, maybe it's just a silly thought. I've been doing some research lately, and I found out something strange about my family. I thought it would be funny to joke about it, but now, I'm kind of wondering, could it be true?" I looked at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. Her words felt like a riddle, something I couldn't quite solve. But then, in the back of my mind, something clicked. The idea wasn't completely out of the blue. We did share a lot of similarities, more than I ever realized. But I couldn't bring myself to entertain the thought. It was absurd. We were just friends. That's all we had ever been. But as the evening wore on, the thought lingered, gnawing at me from the inside. What if? I couldn't stop thinking about it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, the darkness of the room seemed to amplify the thoughts racing through my mind. I couldn't escape them. Her words kept echoing in my head. We shared a connection, she had said. We were so alike, she had said. I tried to shake it off, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. I had always thought of her as my best friend, but now, the lines were starting to blur. The truth hung over me like a thick fog, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it would swallow us both whole. The question wasn't just if we were related, it was how could we ever go back to the way things were before. The next day, she brought it up again. But this time, there was no joke in her voice. We should find out, right? She asked. I mean, if there's even a chance. I could see it in her eyes now, the same uncertainty, the same fear that was slowly creeping up in me. I don't know, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But maybe we should. And just like that, we made a decision that would change everything. We didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of the unraveling. And once that thread was pulled, there would be no going back. We spent the next few days in silence, neither of us daring to bring up the conversation again. But the weight of it lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. Every time I saw her, I could feel the unspoken tension between us, the invisible thread that had once tied us together so effortlessly now fraying at the edges. It wasn't just the idea of a possible family connection that haunted me, it was the way her words had left me questioning everything I had ever known about us. We had been best friends for so long. Could something like that really change the nature of everything between us? She seemed different, too. There was a hesitation in her steps, a nervous energy that had never been there before. She avoided eye contact, and when she did look at me, it was with a kind of vulnerability I wasn't used to seeing. We had always been equals, always had the same unspoken understanding, but now, everything felt like a fragile web about to snap. I didn't know what to do. We were at a crossroads, too much had been said, and now, too much was left unsaid. I found myself staring at her, noticing things about her that I had never truly paid attention to before. Her hair, the way it fell just right, always framing her face perfectly. The way her eyes held a storm of emotions beneath the surface. She was still my best friend, yet she wasn't. I wasn't sure what she was anymore. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from her. It simply read, "I did it. I've arranged for us to get tested. The results will come in soon. I need to know, just as much as you do." The words were so final, so matter of fact. As if this had been decided long ago, and there was no turning back. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I hadn't been expecting this. We had been dancing around the truth for days, but now, it was about to be laid bare. I could already feel the walls closing in on me. I didn't reply immediately. I just stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the keyboard. The decision had been made for me, and yet, I still couldn't bring myself to acknowledge it. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of her house. It was late, too late for a visit, but I couldn't keep away. She had told me to meet her, but I wasn't sure what to expect. Was I ready for this? Was she? When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately. There she stood, her expression unreadable, as if she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't look surprised to see me. "I couldn't wait anymore," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. "I needed to see you, to make sure we were both ready." We sat down on her couch, the silence between us heavy. She handed me a small envelope, the edges frayed as though it had been handled repeatedly. My heart raced in my chest as I took it, but I didn't open it. "Not yet. I didn't want to do this without you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. But I couldn't live with the not knowing. Not anymore. I needed to know who we really were. Her words sliced through me, and I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in days. She wasn't just my best friend anymore. The person sitting in front of me was someone I didn't recognize, someone I had never seen before. There was a rawness in her eyes, a vulnerability that made me feel like I was looking at a stranger. I didn't want to know the truth. Not like this. The fear of what we might find was consuming me. What if the test came back positive? What if we really were related? What would that mean for us? But at the same time, a part of me, desperate, frightened, needed to know. Needed to know if everything I had built with her had been a lie. Or if it was something else entirely. Something I couldn't even begin to understand. I'm scared, I confessed, my voice shaky. What if this ruins everything? Her hand reached out, gently placing itself on top of mine. It was the same hand I had held so many times before, but now it felt different, so much heavier. She looked at me with a quiet understanding, her expression softening. I know, she whispered. But we can't go on pretending. Not anymore. We deserve to know the truth. For a long moment, I sat there, wrestling with myself. My heart was torn between fear and the need for closure. Finally, I reached for the envelope, tearing it open with trembling hands. The test results were right there, staring back at me, but I didn't want to read them. But I had no choice. I slowly unfolded the paper, holding my breath as my eyes scanned the results. My heart sank as the words became clear. The test shows a 99.9% match in DNA. We were siblings. Half-siblings, to be exact. My mind went blank. The room seemed to tilt beneath me, the walls closing in. This couldn't be real. We couldn't be, no, it wasn't possible. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't recognize the person in front of me. She was still the same, yet she wasn't. How could this be happening? How had we not known this before? I felt like I was drowning. The ground beneath me felt unstable, as though it was slipping away. How had everything come to this? How had we crossed a line that we could never come back from? She was looking at me now, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. But there was something else in her gaze, something more than the confusion I saw in my own. A deep, unfathomable sadness. We didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. How could we have known? I didn't know how to respond. Words failed me as I tried to process the weight of what had just been revealed. How had we gotten to this point? The line between right and wrong had blurred so much that I couldn't see where one ended and the other began. And as the minutes ticked by, I knew there was no going back. The weight of the truth settled heavily between us, like an immovable stone that neither of us could shift. We sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, the room closing in on us. I couldn't bring myself to look at her, but I could feel her gaze, burning into the side of my face. It was as if the room itself had turned into a prison, and we were both trapped inside it. I didn't know what to say, how to even begin to process what we had just discovered. We were siblings, half-siblings, but the emotional bond we had shared for years couldn't be undone by something as cold and clinical as DNA. Yet, here we were, staring at each other as if we were strangers. She was the first to break the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. What does this mean for us? I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it nearly impossible to speak. What did it mean for us? Could I even answer that question? I had no idea. I felt as if the very foundation of my life had been shattered, and everything I had thought I understood was now in question. I looked at her, my best friend, the one person I had known more intimately than anyone else in my life. But now, she wasn't just my friend. She was my sister. And the space between us, emotional, physical, felt like an insurmountable chasm. I don't know, I muttered, feeling my voice crack under the weight of it all. I don't know what it means. I don't know how to make sense of any of this. She nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to hold back tears. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the confusion, the anger. I didn't know if she was angry at me, or angry at the situation, or just angry at the world for putting us in this impossible position. "Are we supposed to pretend like nothing's changed?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Are we supposed to just go back to being the way we were before? How can we do that now? We know the truth." I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. What could I say to that? How could I possibly tell her that everything we had been to each other could be erased by the truth? How could I pretend that the bond we had wasn't built on a lie, even if we hadn't known it until now? "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is okay. How can I keep loving you the way I did when this is what we are?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I keep loving her? That was the very question that had been haunting me since the moment I had opened the results of the DNA test. She wasn't just my best friend anymore, she was family. And the love I had for her, was it even allowed anymore? Was it even real? "I don't know if I can do that either," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. The truth had changed everything, and I didn't know how to navigate the new reality we found ourselves in. "I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to look at you the same way. But I can't just walk away from everything we've been, either." Her eyes filled with tears, and she wiped them away quickly, as if she were embarrassed by her own vulnerability. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't want to hurt you either. I don't want to be the reason everything falls apart." My heart twisted in my chest. The last thing I wanted was for her to feel guilty. This wasn't her fault. This wasn't anyone's fault, not really. But the realization that we couldn't go back, that we could never return to the carefree days of childhood, hit me harder than I was prepared for. Maybe we need time," I suggested, my voice shaking. "Maybe we need to step back for a while, to figure out what this all means. I don't want to hurt you, either. I don't want to lose what we had. But I don't know how to keep pretending that things are the same." She nodded slowly, as if she had been expecting this answer. The tension between us was palpable, a rift that had formed too quickly to bridge. I could see the sadness in her eyes, the understanding that we were standing on the edge of something irreversible. We were at the point of no return. "I don't want to hurt either of us," she whispered again. "But I can't live in this limbo forever. I need to know what's next." I sat there, numb, my mind racing as I tried to find some kind of answer to give her. But there was no easy answer, no simple way out of this. The truth had come crashing down on us, and there was no escaping it. "I think we need to let go," I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. "We need to stop pretending everything is okay, because it's not. And maybe that's the hardest thing to admit." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. "But we've been through so much together. We've shared everything. I don't know how to let that go." I didn't know how to let it go either. But I knew that we couldn't keep holding on to something that had already slipped through our fingers. The truth had changed everything. And as much as I wanted to hold on to her, to the way we used to be, I couldn't deny that something fundamental had shifted. The next few days were the hardest of my life. We barely spoke. When we did, the words felt forced, uncomfortable. The weight of our new reality hung between us like a thick fog, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't see through it. And then, one night, she called me. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice quiet and uncertain. Maybe we can't go back. Maybe we shouldn't try to. But that doesn't mean we have to stop being a part of each other's lives." I listened, the pain in her voice making my heart ache. The idea of losing her, of never seeing her again, was unbearable. But the thought of continuing as if nothing had changed felt just as impossible. "I don't know what that means for us," I said, the words barely escaping my throat. "But I know I don't want to lose you completely." We were standing on the edge, unsure of whether to take a step forward or turn back. The path ahead was unclear, and the future seemed uncertain. But in that moment, we both understood something unspoken. The love we had for each other wasn't gone, it was just different. And no matter what happened next, We would have to learn how to navigate this new reality. The silence between us wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't as suffocating as it had been. There was a fragile understanding now, a tentative hope that we could still find a way to keep the bond we had, no matter what form it might take. But the truth would always linger, hovering like a shadow. And nothing would ever be the same again. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us remained. We didn't talk about it, the truth, the DNA test, the shifting nature of what we had once shared. It felt like walking through a fog. Every time we spoke, it was like we were two strangers trying to piece together fragments of a life we used to know. I could feel the distance growing between us, not just physically but emotionally. It wasn't like we didn't care anymore. We did. But the love, the connection that had always been so easy, now seemed impossible to hold on to. It was as though every word we spoke was an attempt to close a gap that had only widened since the revelation. The weight of it all was suffocating, and I had no idea how to fix it, how to make it feel like we weren't standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to fall. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. The laughter, the moments of quiet understanding, the shared memories that now felt tainted. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about what we had been, and what we had lost. I knew it was foolish, there was no going back. But I couldn't stop myself from hoping, wishing that somehow we could return to the way things had been. Then one evening, she called me. "Can we talk?" Her voice was fragile, hesitant. It was the first time she had reached out to me in days, and I could feel the uncertainty in her words, like she was afraid to even ask for my attention. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to face the conversation that I had been avoiding. But I knew I couldn't keep hiding from this. We couldn't keep living in this limbo, pretending like everything was fine when it was far from it. So, I agreed, and within minutes, I was on my way to her house. When I arrived, she was standing at the door, as if she had been waiting for me. There was something different about her, something more vulnerable. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could see it in the way she held herself, the way her eyes seemed to plead with me. We didn't sit on the couch like we used to. Instead, we stood there, facing each other, the distance between us heavy and palpable. "I've been thinking a lot," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "About everything. About us." I nodded, waiting for her to continue, my own heart racing. I didn't know where this conversation was going, but I could feel the tension building, like a storm gathering in the distance. "Do you think we can ever go back?" she asked, her words hanging in the air. "Back to the way we were before? Or is it just too much now?" I didn't answer immediately. My mind was spinning, torn between the part of me that longed for things to be the way they used to be and the reality that we could never go back. We couldn't undo the truth. We couldn't pretend we hadn't learned what we had learned. "I don't know," I said, finally. My voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I don't know if we can. But I don't want to lose you. Not like this." She closed her eyes, and I could see the tears welling up. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered. "But I feel like we're already losing each other. It's like we're both trying to hold on to something that isn't there anymore." Her words hit me like a slap, and I couldn't help but feel the sting of them. It was true. We were holding on to something that was slipping away, no matter how hard we tried to cling to it. "I don't want to lose what we had," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I don't know how to move forward. Everything feels so wrong now." She took a step closer to me, and for a moment, it felt like everything had stopped. Like the world had paused, and it was just the two of us, standing in that fragile space between what we had been and what we were now. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we don't have to lose each other. Maybe we can figure out what we are now, what we mean to each other now. I don't want to let go of you. I can't." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Could we really find a way forward? Could we rebuild something from the wreckage of what had been? But then the truth hit me again, sharp and cold. What if we couldn't? What if this was the end? What if we were too broken, too scarred by what had been revealed? I shook my head, the overwhelming sadness threatening to consume me. I don't know, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can. I don't know if we can. There was a long silence between us, one filled with all the things we couldn't say, all the things we were too afraid to confront. And in that silence, I knew that no matter what we decided, nothing would ever be the same again. I don't want to hurt you, she said, her voice small. I don't want to hurt me either. But I don't know how to stop feeling the way I do. How do we even begin to rebuild this? To rebuild us? I didn't have an answer. I couldn't give her one. We were standing at the crossroads, both of us lost, unsure of which way to go. I reached out, my hand trembling as I touched her arm. I don't know. But I'm not ready to let you go. Not yet. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, but there was something else in them too. Hope. Maybe it was a fragile hope, but it was there. And for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to feel a glimmer of it too. I don't know what comes next, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But maybe we can figure it out together. Maybe we don't have to lose each other. She nodded, her lips trembling as she smiled softly. Maybe. But even as we stood there, together, in that moment, I knew the truth. The truth would never stop haunting us. It would always be there, lingering in the background, shaping everything we did, everything we felt. And I didn't know how to escape it. But for now, we held on to each other, fragile and broken as we were, and tried to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Days turned into weeks, and the fragile hope we had both clung to began to fade. The reality of our situation weighed heavier with each passing moment. We tried, oh, how we tried, to find a way to reconcile the love we had shared with the truth that had shattered everything. But no matter how hard we worked to pretend that we could go back to the way things were, the truth lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. We saw less and less of each other. There were still moments when we spoke, but they were becoming more infrequent, less meaningful. The silence between us grew, thickening with every word we didn't say. Every time we tried to have a conversation, the truth always hung between us like a suffocating cloud. The connection we once shared was still there, but it was now tainted, broken by the knowledge of what we truly were to each other. And somehow, that made everything feel so much worse. It wasn't just the DNA test. It wasn't just the fact that we were half-siblings. It was the way that everything had changed. The way I looked at her now, no longer with the innocent affection I once had, but with something darker, something I couldn't quite define. And I knew she felt it too. I saw it in her eyes every time she looked at me, a flicker of guilt, of confusion, of loss. One evening, I found myself in her kitchen, absent-mindedly stirring a cup of tea while she sat across from me, her gaze distant. We hadn't planned this. We hadn't planned to meet up like this, but something in both of us had longed for the comfort of the familiar, the companionship we had always known. And yet, even now, it felt so empty. I've been thinking, she said suddenly, her voice breaking through the silence that had settled over us. She paused, as if unsure how to continue. Maybe it's time we stopped trying to fix this. The words hit me like a cold gust of wind, and I couldn't help but flinch. Stop trying to fix this? My mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. I mean, maybe we've already done enough damage. Maybe there's no way back for us. No way to fix what's broken. Her words stung, but there was a truth in them that I couldn't deny. We had tried everything to salvage what had once been, but it felt like we were holding on to something that had already slipped through our fingers. No matter how hard we tried to put the pieces back together, they wouldn't fit. The cracks were too deep, too wide. I don't want to lose you, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the confession. But I can't pretend that things are the same. I can't pretend that we can just forget. She nodded slowly, as though she had been expecting this answer. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at me, her hands trembling in her lap. "I know," she whispered. "I've been pretending too. I've been pretending that I can still love you the way I used to. But every time I look at you, it feels like I'm betraying everything. Everything we were." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "What do we do now?" She didn't respond right away. Instead, she stood up and walked over to the window, looking out into the darkening sky. "I don't know," she said softly. "I don't know if there's anything left for us. But I do know one thing." She turned to face me, her expression resolute. "We can't keep doing this to each other. We can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." I stared at her, the rawness of her words cutting through me. She was right. We couldn't keep pretending. But the thought of walking away from everything we had been, it felt like a betrayal, even though I knew deep down it was the only thing left to do. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening, and I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. How had we gotten here? How had everything we once had turned into this unbearable weight? Finally, she broke the silence again. "Maybe we need to let go. Maybe it's time we let each other go." The words felt like a knife to my chest. Let go? Could we really do that? Could we really walk away from the bond that had once felt so unbreakable? But as much as I didn't want to, I knew she was right. We were too broken now. There was too much pain between us, too much that couldn't be undone. "I don't want to," I said quietly. "But I don't know how to fix this. And I don't want to keep hurting you. I don't want to keep pretending we can be what we used to be." She took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she wiped away a stray tear. "Then maybe it's time to let go. To let go of the past, of what we thought we were. Maybe it's time to accept that we can't keep fighting this." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know if I could accept that, if I could let go of everything we had shared. But as I looked at her, I realized that it wasn't just about us anymore. It wasn't just about the love we had for each other, it was about the truth, about what had been revealed and how we had to move forward, even if it meant leaving everything behind. I guess I don't know how to do that," I admitted, my voice barely audible. "I don't know how to walk away from you." She nodded slowly, her gaze softening for a brief moment. "Neither do I," she whispered. "But sometimes, walking away is the only way to move forward." It felt like a goodbye, even though we hadn't said the words out loud. But in that moment, I knew it was the end. There was no going back. And as much as I wanted to fight it, as much as I wanted to keep holding on, I knew that the only way for us to heal was to let go. We both stood there, silently acknowledging the truth between us. And in that silence, something inside me shifted. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that we couldn't keep running from the past. And so, we stood there, together, yet apart, and faced the reality of our situation. The love we once shared was no longer enough to hold us together. But the respect we had for each other, the understanding that had always been there, would carry us through the hardest part of all, letting go. Weeks passed, and the emptiness between us continued to grow, a void that neither of us could fill. I tried to go back to my routine, pretending that things were okay, but it wasn't the same. Nothing was the same. Every corner I turned, every quiet moment I had, I could feel the absence of her, like a wound that hadn't quite healed but had started to scar over. I thought I could move on, thought that time would make everything easier. But it didn't. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder the silence became. The truth we couldn't escape, was like a constant, gnawing ache inside me, one that wouldn't go away no matter how hard I tried to bury it. I'd see her occasionally, brief moments in the hallways, quick glances when our paths crossed. But it was never the same. She never looked at me the way she used to, and I never looked at her the way I used to. It was as if we were both strangers now, bound together by something we couldn't control. One evening, I received a message from her. It was simple, a few words, but it made my heart skip a beat. "Can we talk?" I didn't hesitate. I was already expecting this, in some way. I knew there were things left unsaid, things that had to be addressed before we could move on, whatever that moving on was supposed to look like. I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way we were, but I knew we needed closure. We needed something, even if it was just a clean break. I met her at the park, the place where we used to go when we were younger, where we would sit for hours and talk about everything and nothing. It felt like a lifetime ago, but it was the only place that seemed to hold any semblance of comfort. She was already there when I arrived, standing by the old oak tree we used to sit under. Her back was to me, and I could see the way her shoulders were tense, as if she was carrying the weight of the world. "I thought I might find you here," I said quietly, my voice betraying the emotions I had tried so hard to suppress. She turned slowly, her face a mask of both relief and sorrow. When she spoke, her voice was fragile, like glass. "I don't know how to do this, how to make things right between us. I don't even know if we can fix this." There it was again, the uncertainty. The same question that had been lingering between us for so long. Can we fix this? Could we ever go back to what we had? Or was it too broken to ever repair? "I don't think we can go back to what we were," I replied, my voice steady but full of sadness. "But I think we need to figure out what we are now. Not as we were, but as we are. Whatever that means." She nodded, looking down at the ground. "I've been thinking a lot about that," she said. "About what we are. What we could be." I waited, not knowing what to expect. Part of me wanted her to say something that would make everything feel right again, to tell me that we could somehow turn back time, that the truth could be erased with enough love and effort. But deep down, I knew that wasn't possible. We couldn't undo what had already been done. "I've realized that maybe we can't keep holding on to the past," she continued. "Maybe it's time to accept that what we had is gone. And what we are now, maybe we can't be what we once were. But that doesn't mean we can't still be something important to each other." Her words hung in the air, heavy and filled with meaning. It wasn't the resolution I had been hoping for, but it was something. Something I could hold on to. There was a kind of bittersweet acceptance in her voice, a quiet acknowledgement that we couldn't change the past but that we could still choose how to move forward, even if that meant walking separate paths. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "But I don't know how to be the person you need me to be. I don't know how to love you the way I did before, knowing what I know now." She stepped closer, her eyes full of understanding. "I don't expect you to love me the way you did before. But maybe we can still care about each other. Maybe we can find a way to still be in each other's lives, even if it's not the same as it used to be." I let out a long breath, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "I don't know if I can. But I want to try. I just don't know how." She reached out and took my hand, and for the briefest moment, it felt like the old days again. Her touch was warm, familiar, and it reminded me of everything we had shared. But it also reminded me of everything we had lost. "We don't have to have all the answers right now," she said softly. "We just have to take it one step at a time." And in that moment, I realized that maybe that was all we could do. One step at a time. We couldn't go back to what we were, but maybe we could build something new from the wreckage. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be perfect. But perhaps, just perhaps, it was worth trying. As the evening wore on, we talked about the past, about the present, and about what might come next. The conversation wasn't easy. There were moments of silence, moments of tears, moments of regret. But there was also something else, something that had been missing for so long. A small, fragile thread of hope. When it was time to leave, we stood up, both of us reluctant to part ways. She gave me a small smile, and I returned it, though it didn't quite reach my eyes. But there was something in that smile, a quiet promise that maybe, just maybe, we could figure this out. "I'll see you around," she said softly, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like maybe we could still be a part of each other's lives. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we would ever truly be okay again. But in that moment, standing there in the fading light, I realized that the most important thing was that we hadn't given up. And maybe that was enough, for now. We walked away from each other that night, each of us carrying the burden of what we had been, but also a glimmer of hope for what we could become. Whatever that might look like. The days that followed were an uneasy truce between us, an attempt to rebuild what we had, even though both of us knew deep down that the foundation was cracked, maybe beyond repair. We saw each other in passing, small moments that seemed to stretch into eternity. It was as if we were both walking on eggshells, afraid to step too close or too far, unsure of where the boundaries of our relationship now lay. We were both trying so hard to find some semblance of normalcy, but the truth always lingered, hanging between us like a dark cloud we couldn't shake off. We had both accepted that we couldn't go back, but even in the acceptance, there was a pain that never really dulled. It was like a wound that had healed on the surface but still hurt when touched. Every smile we shared, every laugh, was tinged with that underlying sadness, a constant reminder that everything had changed. One evening, weeks after that conversation in the park, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, staring at the empty walls. It was one of those rare moments of stillness when the noise in my head finally quieted. And in that stillness, I realized just how much I missed her. Not in the way I used to, not with the same kind of naive longing, but with a deep, aching sorrow. I missed the way we used to talk, the way she would finish my sentences, the way we could share a single look and know exactly what the other was thinking. I missed her presence, the comfort she brought, even in the silence. I picked up my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to call her, to reach out, but I wasn't sure what to say anymore. What was left to say? We had already said everything we needed to, and still, it felt like there were so many unspoken words between us. Was it possible to heal from something like this? Was it possible to love again, to rebuild from the ashes of everything we had once been? I closed my eyes, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I had to see her. Even if it was just for a moment, I needed to know if there was still something between us. Or if we had truly lost it all. I sent her a text. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." It took her a while to respond, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw the notification pop up on my screen. "I don't know if we should," her reply said, simple but full of hesitation. "But maybe we can." It was enough. It was more than enough. We agreed to meet at the same park, the place where everything had started to unravel. There was something fitting about it, the place that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a battlefield. The very ground we stood on seemed to echo with the ghosts of our past. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting on the same bench where we had shared so many hours, talking about everything and nothing. She looked up when I approached, and for a moment, it felt like time had paused, like we were two people who hadn't been through hell together, who hadn't been torn apart by the truth. "Hi," she said softly, her voice strained. There was an awkwardness between us now, a tension that hadn't been there before. We had always been so comfortable with each other, but now it felt like we were both walking on fragile ground, unsure of where to step next. "Hi," I replied, my voice hoarse. I sat down beside her, but there was a space between us, a gap that neither of us knew how to bridge. We didn't speak right away. Instead, we just sat there, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees filling the silence. The familiar comfort was gone, replaced by something else, something harder, something raw. "I don't know how to do this," I said finally, breaking the silence. "I don't know how to fix us. I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. But I also don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose the part of you that's still my friend." She turned to look at me, and her eyes were filled with so much pain, so much regret. "I don't want to lose you either," she whispered. "But I don't know what we are anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. I feel like I've lost myself," I said quietly. "Like I don't know who I am anymore without you." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the ground. I could see the struggle in her, she was torn, just like I was. She wanted to find a way back to what we had, but she knew, just as I did, that it wasn't possible. Not anymore. We can't keep pretending, she said, her voice barely audible. But maybe we can find a way to still be in each other's lives. Maybe we can figure out what comes next. But it's going to take time. I nodded, though my heart felt heavy. I don't know if we'll ever be the same, I whispered. But maybe we don't have to be. Maybe we can find a new way forward, even if it's just as friends. There was a long pause before she spoke again. I don't know if we can ever go back to being just friends, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I'm willing to try. I don't want to lose you, even if it's not the same as it was before. We sat there in silence again, the weight of our conversation hanging in the air. We both knew that things could never be the way they once were. The love we had shared, the connection that had once felt so unbreakable, was shattered. But in that moment, I realized that maybe it didn't need to be the same. Maybe we didn't need to go back to what we were. We just needed to move forward. I'll try, I said softly. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'll try. And maybe that was enough, for now. Maybe trying was all we could do. As we stood up to leave, there was no grand gesture, no sweeping declaration. Just a quiet understanding that we were both still here, still trying, still willing to see where this uncertain path would lead us. And as we parted ways that evening, I didn't feel the pain of the past as acutely as I had before. There was still an ache, a scar that would never fully heal, but there was also something else, a small, fragile spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way forward. Together, even if it wasn't in the way we had once imagined. And that, for now, was enough. The days that followed were heavy, like trying to walk through a fog that didn't clear no matter how much you tried to push through it. She and I didn't meet again for a while. I think we both needed space, time to process everything that had been said, everything that had been left unsaid. But the silence between us wasn't comfortable anymore. It wasn't the kind of quiet that you can sink into and feel at peace, it was the kind of silence that gnawed at you, ate at you from the inside. Every time I found myself alone, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about us, about what we had lost and whether we could find anything worth salvaging. I couldn't even pinpoint when the last time I had truly smiled had been. The days seemed to pass in a blur of half-hearted attempts at moving on, at pretending everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for weeks now. It felt like I was living in a world that didn't quite fit me anymore, like I was an actor playing a role in a life I no longer recognized. And the only person who knew what I was truly feeling, the person who could have made everything feel a little less unbearable, was the one person I couldn't be with. I remember the night she called. The moment my phone buzzed with her name, a strange mix of dread and hope surged through me. I hadn't expected her to reach out again. I hadn't expected us to try again, not after the last conversation we'd had. I had thought maybe we'd both given up, that we would eventually drift apart, unable to overcome what had come between us. But there she was, reaching out, like she always had when I needed her most. "Can we meet?" she texted. Just those simple words, but they hit me like a punch in the chest. The ache, the longing, the uncertainty all came flooding back at once. I hesitated, my mind running through a million different scenarios. What would we talk about? Could we even talk anymore? Was there still something worth talking about? I didn't know. But I also knew that I couldn't ignore her. I couldn't pretend she wasn't a part of me, even if we were no longer the same. I replied, yes. Where? She suggested a small cafe we used to visit when we were younger, the kind of place that held memories of simpler times, of carefree moments before everything had changed. The place had always been our sanctuary, a place where we could just be ourselves without the weight of the world pressing down on us. I didn't know why she picked it, but I knew why I agreed. When I arrived, she was already sitting at a table in the corner, her eyes focused on the coffee cup in front of her, her fingers nervously tracing the rim. She looked like she had been waiting for a long time, and as soon as I stepped into the cafe, her head snapped up, and for a split second, I saw it, the pain, the guilt, the uncertainty. It was in the way her eyes lingered on me, like she was afraid to approach me, afraid of what might happen if we tried to close the distance between us. I walked over and sat across from her, the silence between us thick and awkward, but neither of us knew where to start. We had so much to say, but saying it felt like too much, like we were walking on the edge of something fragile, something that could shatter if we weren't careful. "You wanted to talk?" I said, my voice softer than I intended. She nodded, but the words didn't come easily. She seemed lost in thought, as if she were searching for the right thing to say. I felt the same way. What was there left to say? What could we possibly talk about that wouldn't remind us of everything we had lost? "I don't know what I'm doing," she said finally, her voice small. "I don't know why I reached out. I don't know what I want, but I can't keep pretending like I don't care." My heart clenched in my chest. "I don't want to pretend either," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "But everything has changed. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know how to make sense of any of this." She sighed, and I could see the frustration in her eyes. "I feel the same way. I feel like I'm stuck, like we're both stuck. I don't know how to fix this. But I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose us, even if we're not the same anymore." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time I allowed myself to feel the weight of everything we had shared. The laughter, the quiet moments, the memories of all the years we had spent together, those were still there, even if everything else felt broken. "We can't go back," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. "We can't go back to the way things were, but I don't know how to move on from here. I don't know what we are anymore." She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine before resting gently on top of it. The simple touch felt like a lifeline, like a bridge between two people who had been torn apart but still clung to the hope that they could find something worth saving. "I don't have the answers," she said, her voice full of quiet determination. "But I want to try. I want to find a way forward. Even if it's not the same as before. Even if we're not the same." I looked at her, and in that moment, I saw it, the same flicker of hope that had been there when we first met. It was small, fragile, but it was enough. Maybe we didn't have all the answers. Maybe we didn't know what we were anymore, but we were still here. We were still trying. "I'm willing to try," I whispered. "Even if I don't know how. Even if it's hard." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel completely lost. We didn't have to have everything figured out. We didn't need to fix everything right away. But maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to move forward, one step at a time. We sat there for a while, talking about the past, about the things that had torn us apart, and about what we wanted, what we needed, from this strange new version of us. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. And in that something, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. Not the way we were, but maybe in a way that was better, even if it was different. Maybe that was enough. The weeks that followed were a slow, painful process of rebuilding, not just our relationship, but ourselves. We were both tentative, afraid to rush into something that could fall apart again. We were too cautious, too scarred by the past to dive in fully. But somehow, in the small, quiet moments we shared, over coffee, on walks, in passing conversations, I could feel the faintest hint of healing. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was something. We didn't talk about everything all at once. We couldn't. There were still too many layers, too many unhealed wounds between us. But we did something that felt impossible at first. We started to talk about the things that hurt. Slowly, carefully, we brought up the past, the things that had been left unsaid, the moments where we had hurt each other, and the mistakes that had led us to this point. And even though it was hard, even though each conversation brought its own set of tears and regrets, there was something cathartic about it. We learned to listen. Really listen. To each other's fears, our doubts, and our hopes for the future. We learned that the foundation we had once built had been eroded by secrets, but that didn't mean we couldn't start again. It was never going to be the same, but that didn't mean it couldn't be something new. The turning point came one evening, months after that first awkward, tentative meeting at the cafe. We were sitting in her living room, the same place where we'd spent so many nights talking about everything and nothing. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. In fact, it was the opposite. It was the kind of silence that came after understanding, after the pain had been acknowledged and there was no more need to fill the space with words. "I think I'm finally starting to see it," she said quietly, her eyes focused on the photo album in her lap, filled with pictures from our childhood. "I'm starting to see that everything we had doesn't have to be gone. It doesn't have to be a loss. It's just changed." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "Yeah," I replied softly. "I think I'm seeing that too. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. We're different now, but we don't have to lose what we were, what we meant to each other." She looked at me then, her gaze full of a tenderness I hadn't seen in so long. "I don't know what's going to happen. But I want to try. I want to see if we can still find a way forward, together. Even if it's not exactly the way it used to be." A heavy weight lifted from my chest. It wasn't the answer I had expected, but it was the one I needed. We had never truly let go of each other, not in the way that mattered. We had tried, but the connection between us had always been there, buried beneath the pain, waiting for the right moment to surface. "I want to try too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I want to find a way to be in each other's lives again. Not as we were, but as we are now. And maybe that's okay." For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled. It was small, but it was genuine. And in that moment, I realized that maybe we didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe the most important thing was that we were both willing to keep trying, even if it meant taking small steps, one day at a time. We didn't need to be perfect. We didn't need to fix everything. But we could keep moving forward, together. Even if the future was uncertain, even if the road was rocky and filled with unknowns, we had each other. And for now, that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, we slowly built a new version of our relationship. It wasn't the same as before, but it was real. We were real. And that was enough. We still had our ups and downs. There were moments when the weight of everything we had been through felt unbearable, when the pain of what we had lost threatened to pull us back into the darkness. But there were also moments of joy, of laughter, of connection. We learned to appreciate each other in a way we never had before, with a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly be there for someone. And in time, we found a new rhythm, a new way of being in each other's lives. We weren't just the people we had been before, but we were something more, something stronger, something more resilient. In the end, we learned that love doesn't always look the way you think it will. Sometimes, it's messy, complicated, and painful. But sometimes, it's also beautiful. Sometimes, it's enough to simply try, even when the road ahead is unclear. As I looked at her, sitting across from me in the quiet of her living room, I realized that this new version of us, was something I could live with. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. And that was all I needed. "We'll be okay," I said, the words coming more easily now. "Maybe not the way we thought we would be, but we'll be okay." She smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. And maybe that's all any of us can ask for, a little bit of hope, a little bit of love, and the courage to keep moving forward, no matter how hard the journey might be. In the end, I realized that sometimes, the things that break us are the very things that make us stronger. And that was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life.